We can get through this, but we have to stick together.
So nice to meet you, Caitlin. Once again, maybe just for another introduction, just for the camera.
You, yes.
So I'm Matt. I write for Horreur Québec. So it's a website dedicated to all things horror.
Great.
So we love the film. It was, it was a good experience. I saw it earlier this week, and I was just on my social media, and before I saw that you were on the Criterion closet yesterday.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a bit jealous. I'm not gonna lie.
I think everybody should be jealous. If you are interested in film, then you should definitely be jealous. It was absolutely incredible.
It's on my bucket list.
Yes.
I need to ask you maybe one pick that you made during that video, if you can.
You know what I took home is Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yes.
And I didn't even realize there was a Criterion edition. I had no idea. When I saw it, I was like, this for sure. Absolutely, no question. So I think I made good choices.
That's perfect. I'm so jealous. Like one time in my life, hopefully I can go in that closet.
The other thing is they're so nice.
Yeah.
Everyone who works there, so nice.
Were you able to grab like a lot of them, or?
There's a 5-disc limit.
Awesome.
Because people get crazy, which I totally understand. You could go bananas in there. But it was careful planning and good choices. I think because my family has a lot of the earlier edition Criterions already, so I could just forget about those.
Obviously, yeah. Good. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, I write for our website, and I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the scariest aspect of your film?
I think the scariest aspect of Humane is the fact that it's so close to the reality that we're living in. I think that the first time I read the script, it was pre-COVID, and living through a pandemic, something that none of us have ever lived through anything like it in our lives, and understanding just how fragile we are as a planet and how quickly things can change is something that was fun to explore in a way that, it was really not focusing on that, but focusing on the family. But the fact that it's so close to our reality is really terrifying.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. It's actually because it feels very much like a cautionary tale on the state of the climate and everything that's going on. So I'm curious, like, why now? What did it feel like was the perfect timing? Like, how did the stars align for that project?
I mean, funnily enough, because Michael did write it before the pandemic. So I think it's strange, actually, how much has happened since we set forth to do this project. It's like those years that two filmmakers make a movie about, a comet hitting the Earth, and it's just a coincidence. So a lot of it felt a lot like that. There are more conversations around medically assisted suicide, especially in Canada, and there weren't as many 5 years ago when we first had these conversations. So I think it's just something that's in the air that we realize is very prevalent, and we're just starting to talk about more because these are the issues that we're facing. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, that's a great answer, because there's also like this social commentary on the overpopulation. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, what was your approach with that? What kind of subtext you wanted to create with the overpopulation in the film?
I mean, I think that we're a bit immune to really truly understanding the problem of overpopulation in Canada, because we have such a large country and surprisingly few people within that country, as very, very opposite to so many other countries that are very, very populated. I honestly had no intention of having this be a teachable moment about overpopulation. I think that this is all part of the same crisis, and it's not my position as a non-expert and non-scientist to explain this to the public, and I would never want anyone to misunderstand my intentions. I'm really happy to just create this hopefully entertaining film that makes you think and wonder, should I be paying more attention to climate change? Should I be educating myself more about these issues? And what are the questions that I really need to ask myself?
Absolutely, and you're just talking about how the film kind of has a fun aspect to it, and even though it's more of a dark comedy, I would still say that there's some funny moments in it, and it's kind of like a comedy in some ways. And I'm curious, what was your thought process in casting like good Canadian kids like Jay Baruchel? And I'm sure comes from like a comedy background and have a lot of a comedy background.
Well, the script was funny. The script was always funny, and that was one of the things I really liked about it, because I think that this subject matter, without the reprieve of comedy, is bleak. and it's so bleak. And I don't think I could be sitting here excited to talk about it 5 years later if it was the most depressing movie ever made. It's harder to convince people to see a movie that's depressing about something that's happening in our world, I think. So we knew it was funny. I think casting actors with incredible comedic backgrounds it was worrisome to the horror fans and to the thriller fans, because you don't want it to turn into a straight comedy necessarily. But I was very confident that all of our actors who, veer on the side of comedy generally also have incredible, serious, straightforward acting abilities, of course. And they had the opportunity to really shine in every direction. These characters are so multifaceted, despicable people, but you see their heart shining through in a few moments, a little bit of emotion here and there, and then utterly despicable for the rest. But I do think that people are inherently funny, and I think that a lot of people tend to use humor as a defense mechanism when they're scared. And so I thought that felt actually quite natural for them to hide behind that humor in those moments.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because Jay Baruchel is someone who could have been, seen as a miscast, and I'm putting like big emphasis on that. But ultimately, maybe his character seems like an asshole at first, but as the movie progresses, you kind of find an interesting way to develop his character arc. I think it was not predictable. I felt the way you handled those characters, so that was really interesting. And in terms of the family dynamic, once again, it's something that's really like a main theme of the film. And I'm just curious, like, what personally inspired you to explore the relationship between like siblings and children?
Well, I will say that Michael's family is more similar in terms of layout than my family. Okay. I will throw him under the bus and say that he wrote this, not based on his family, but at least inspired by more complex sibling dynamics. I think that my family is quite boring in the fact that we just get along with each other. We really love each other. We don't have, there isn't tension in my family. It's a loving and supporting environment, which doesn't play at all in this film. But I think it was actually quite fun to delve into and explore a family so different from my own, and that gave me a bit more license to like say, well, come on, wouldn't you hit your brother? Wouldn't you stab them? Like,
yeah, I hit my brother sometimes in my life. I did. Yeah. We had some fights.
I mean, I have two boys who are 4 and 8. And, I see, even just watching their dynamic, how close and loving they can be in one moment, and how they can be wrestling on another moment, and, trying to throw each other down the stairs, and everything in between. So all of that to say, emotions run really hot, and sibling dynamics are really very interesting. Yeah. And it starts from the second they're born.
That's true. No, that's completely true. And I feel like in some way when I was watching the movie, I was thinking like, oh, maybe like some of Caitlin's like family is being projected in those characters. But I really like the fact that you're saying, well, it's actually more of Michael's side, which is the screenwriter and the producer. Yes. So that's really interesting. And it also considering the large ambition of the project, because it's kind of like painting this dystopian world that they live in. Like, what do you think was the biggest challenge in terms of the budget while filming? Not necessarily the budget, but kind of like the constraint. What would make this difficult a little bit more in terms of reaching your ambitions for that film?
I mean, we had 20 days. To shoot the film, which is tight at the best of times, I would say. And we, there's a lot of action. There were a lot of stunts. There are huge dialogue-heavy scenes throughout. And it was really challenging to also build the world satisfactorily outside of the house, while keeping it feeling like an intimate family drama. I didn't want to show, giant sweeping desert shots. It wasn't feeling like the same film. And again, it's not meant to be a climate change lesson. It's really meant to be this family drama. So utilizing the media in the house, and the fact that the Charles character was a news anchor for so long, so he would have the news on in his house all the time. And just being able to utilize that as a mechanism to sort of teach the audience without being too expository about what's happening in the world outside of the house. but we also wanted to trust the audience and have them understand that you can tell what's going on with just a little bit of information. And then at the same time, this isn't a The Road style apocalyptic moment. This is what I feel was more realistic in terms of if the environment were to reach a collapsing point where we're in crisis, it would take longer to feel it in cities. It wouldn't just suddenly be chaos and fires and people setting cop cars on fire and riots. It starts in in the large natural areas, I would imagine, and it seeps into the cities later on. So for them to walk outside the door and have everything look normal, it's a bit more unsettling to me that you know what's going on.
Feels closer to home. Like it's closer to home. Like feels like much more closer to reality. And you were talking about the news excerpt and the radio playing. Like you started the movie this way. Mm-hmm. Was it why you decided to start a movie with like news and message from the radio, kind of like immersing the audience in the world? Was that your...
Absolutely, yes. And it wasn't necessarily scripted that way from the beginning. Okay. We did have a more billboards and commercials, and ultimately it didn't feel better. It felt better to just lead with, this is the world. If you were a character in this world, this is what you hear every day. Mm-hmm. But there are lots of Easter eggs if you go back through the film and read every line on the chirons on the screen. Every single one is written by Michael, every little tidbit. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of hidden gems throughout.
I feel like I've noticed a couple of things. I can't remind it right now.
I can't either.
yeah. But I remember seeing a couple of things like, oh, that was really interesting. And we talk about the climate. So like in some ways, the film kind of feels like a call for action in some ways. What do you wish the audience take away from that film?
I mean, I strongly believe that it's all of our duties to educate ourselves. Again, I'm not hoping that this film is going to be the moment that educates you, because it isn't meant to. But I think the fact that it does feel a little bit too close to home is something that could hopefully encourage people who haven't thought about this as much to understand how quickly things change. I think that all of us living through COVID was really what changed people's minds, and giving you the really understanding that, oh no, it can happen to me too. The family, clearly thinks that they're not going to be affected by this crisis. Yeah. And then they are. And I think that I remember having a baby in February of 2020. There was one case of COVID in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, well, whatever. I'm just going to have this baby and go home and life will be normal. And then 3 weeks later, everything shut down. Mm-hmm. And I truly thought in that moment, well, this won't affect me. This is a problem that's happening elsewhere. This is not a problem that will happen to me. And 3 weeks later, it was all of us collectively having this traumatic experience. And I think it's terrifying to think of that. And I think it is up to us to read the news, listen to scientists, understand what's going on in terms of the population, in terms of climate change. Global warming is happening. We've all experienced it. We're experiencing it now. We're not that far off from needing additional sun protection. Mm-hmm. And these are lessons that I want people to learn on their own, and then see my movie and hopefully laugh and have a great time. A little bit of escapism that may remind us a little bit of the world we're living in.
No, it doesn't feel like you're hitting like the audience with that hammer on the head. Like I feel like you find some levity with some small moments between the interaction between the siblings and everything. There's like some funny moments, but at the core, it's also a little bit of a horror film, if we may say so. So I mean, there's been a strong evolution of the horror genre over the past few years. Well, maybe more to the public eye, but overall, like you and me, I feel like we've both been horror fans our whole life. Well, I was. I don't know for you.
I wasn't.
I know you weren't. Oh, that's interesting. But what are your thoughts on the state of the horror today in movies?
Oh, I do think that it's really interesting to see the horror genre evolve into complete genre line crossing films and projects. And I don't classify this as a horror movie. I think that there are horror elements to it, but I think that someone who is expecting the classic horror tropes will be disappointed with Humane. And I'm trying to be clear that it's not the same as these horror movies that we think of, the movies that we immediately think of when you say horror movies. There are horrible things that go on in the movie, but I do think that content creators and directors and I think there are more interesting lines being crossed in the genre world. And I think that is giving people freedom to explore concepts in new ways and not be scared of humor and not be scared of darkness and humor together. And I think that's a lot of fun. I think there will be really, really interesting projects coming out of the genre in the next few years too.
No, that's really interesting. And before I go, my friend Julia from Letterboxd wants to ask you your Letterboxd top 4.
What? I'm
showing you. You did that already?
Yeah, I did Letterboxd.
Which one was it?
Okay. I picked The Fugitive.
Fugitive?
I picked Cabaret.
Cabaret, great.
I picked Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Love that pick.
And My Cousin Vinny.
Wow, I love a lot of. So you're a fan of comedy? I
do. I love comedy.
Yeah.
I put thrillers in one genre.
Okay.
That I love watching.
Yeah.
I love watching a straight up 90s thriller.
Yeah.
I love musicals. I just saw Eddie Redmayne in Cabaret in New York.
Oh, wow.
2 nights ago, and it was fabulous.
Must have been awesome, yeah.
It was amazing.
I love that he went back to doing like stage.
It's incredible, and he's so good.
Yeah.
And then I put the Coen brothers in their own category, right? So Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is, for me, the one that represents where I kind of fell in love with their zaniness.
Awesome.
And then My Cousin Vinny has just been my favorite movie since I was a kid.
Instantly rewatchable. Anytime you can watch a movie.
So rewatchable.
Yeah.
And my husband loves it too, and we both know every word. When we met, and I realized that we both knew every single line, I was like, all right, soulmates. This is it. We both love My Cousin Vinny.
He's a keeper.
Yeah.
Good, I have to go, Caitlin, but thank you so much for your time.
So
really
much.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
And
to
congratulations
meet you.
on the film.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
What are they still doing in the house?
You know, based on my experience in similar situations, I want to say, yeah, killing one another.